Imagine it's 19th of November 1969. You are standing in Maracanã Stadium, Rio de Janeiro. The air feels heavy. Every sound is louder than it should be. Boots scrape the grass. Whistles cut through the night. Flashbulbs burst like tiny explosions in the dark. Tens of thousands of voices rise and fall as one, but nobody is really watching the match. They are waiting for one moment, one finish, one touch. One number. Pelé is on 999, at least according to the count that matters tonight. Every person inside this stadium feels the same pressure. The goalkeeper knows it. The defenders know it. The photographers know it. Brazil knows it. Football is waiting to see history happen in real time. If you love untold football stories and hidden moments from the beautiful game, subscribe now. Because the story you're about to hear changed football history forever. When Pelé finally stepped up and scored what the world called his 1,000th goal, it felt like the argument was over. The king had reached a place no one else could touch. The number was clean, beautiful, unforgettable. But football has never been that simple. Because the second the crowd began to celebrate, another question quietly began to grow. In the shadows. What exactly had they counted? Which matches mattered? Which goals survived the passage of time? And if Pelé had 1,000 or 1,279 or 1,283 depending on who was speaking, then who really owned the highest mountain? In football history, that is the mystery at the heart of this story. Not just who scored the most goals, but who gets remembered as if they did. Modern football fans usually think this race belongs to a handful of giants. Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, Pelé, Romário, maybe Ferenc Puskás, maybe Gerd Müller. Those names are real, and their numbers are enormous. But once you go backward, into the broken archive of football history, the list starts to change. Suddenly, above some of the most famous players who ever lived, there are men. Many fans have never even heard of. Men whose goals were scored before television, before global marketing, before high-definition replays, before social media clips could turn every finish into a worldwide event in seconds. And that is where the story becomes interesting, far more interesting than a simple countdown, because one of the most prolific scorers ever recorded is not Pelé, not Ronaldo, and not Messi. On one major historical list of official match scorers compiled by football statisticians, the name at the top is Erwin Helmchen of Germany, credited with 989 or more goals in 582 official matches. Almost nobody alive saw him play. Almost nobody speaks about him in mainstream football debates. Yet the archive says his numbers are almost beyond belief. More than 140 official hat-tricks. Seasons swallowed by war. Goals scattered across league football, cup football, regional selections, and city selections, and a world that kept records in newspapers, notebooks, and fading club ledgers. Instead of central databases, just below that comes Cristiano Ronaldo, now standing on 975 goals. On that same kind of historical all-official list, still chasing the impossible, even in the final stretch of an already mythic career. Then Josef Bican, with 950 or more. Then Ronald Rook of England with 934 or more. Then Lionel Messi with 925. And with that, the shape of the mountain becomes clear. This is not just a race between superstars. It is a race between eras, between different football worlds, and between different definitions of truth. To understand that, you have to go back to the game before football became one giant connected conversation. In the early and middle parts of the 20th century, football was more local, more chaotic, and in many places more brutal. Schedules were different, tournaments overlapped, record-keeping depended on clubs, newspapers, local associations, and memory. Some matches that mattered deeply to the people who played them were later treated as lesser by historians. Some wartime competitions were counted by one source and ignored by another. Some goals in regional championships or selection matches survived in archives. Others vanished. Some players built legends in leagues that the modern global fan barely studies at all. So when people today ask one clean question, who scored the most goals in football history, they are really asking a messy one. Which football history are we talking about? Before we continue, I want to hear your opinion. What do you think really happened? Let me know in the comments. Take Josef Bican. If Pelé was the global king, Bican is the ghost king. Born in Vienna, shaped by poverty after the death of his father, he later said that playing barefoot as a child helped give him his remarkable touch. He broke into professional football with Rapid Vienna, starred for Austria's great Wunder Team generation, scored at the 1934 World Cup, and then moved to Slavia Prague in 1937, where his legend exploded. FIFA once described him as averaging 1.52 goals per game at club level. Sports historian Radovan Jelinek said Bican was incredibly unlucky because there was no World Cup in 1942 or 1946. If those tournaments had happened, Jelinek believed, Bican might have been as famous as Pelé. Think about that for a second. A man with numbers that stand, beside the biggest name in football history, lost his global stage because of war. And Bican himself understood the strange way football memory works. In 1990, he answered young reporters who claimed scoring had been easier in his day by saying something beautiful in its simplicity. If there are chances, he said, scoring is the same as it was 100 years ago, and it will be the same 100 years from now. That line matters because it cuts through nostalgia and arrogance at the same time. Every era thinks its conditions were unique. Every era thinks its greatness is harder to measure. Bican's answer was simple. The goal is still the goal. Hungary gave football several men who seemed to live, only for the net to ripple. Ferenc Puskás is the most famous of them, and for reason. He scored 84 goals in 85 internationals for Hungary, then arrived at Real Madrid. At the age of 31, reportedly dismissed by some in Spain as too old to matter. Instead, he scored 242 goals in 262 matches for Madrid and became one of the deadliest left-footed players the Bernabeu had ever seen. But Puskás was not even the most mysterious Hungarian on the list. Ferenc Puskás scored 795 or more official goals, and once hit 66 league goals in a single top-division season, a record that sounds invented when you first hear it. Ferenc Puskás reached 634. Gyula Zengler passed 611. Sandor Kocsis, whose heading could terrorize entire defenses, climbed to 556. In some football countries, goals came not as isolated miracles, but as a culture, almost as if certain cities had learned how to manufacture finishers in groups. Portugal had its own hidden monster in Fernando Peroteio, who scored 625 official goals. In just 380 matches on this list, one of the most frightening ratios ever seen. Later came Eusebio with 634 or more, and José Torres with 561. Germany gave us not only Helmchen, but Gerd Müller, football's penalty box assassin. FIFA remembered Müller as a striker who could score from any position, on the turn, with either foot, with his head, standing up, or even falling down. He scored 68 goals in only 62 matches for West Germany and 14 in World Cups. And when asked about his winning goal in the 1974 final, he said he had scored better goals, but not one more important. Then there is Britain and Ireland, where the list starts to feel like a secret archive of local gods. Ronald Rook with 934 or more. Jimmy Jones of Northern Ireland with 840 or more. Tommy Lawton with 749 or more. Sammy Hughes with 722 or more. Joe Bambrick with 690. Pongo Waring with 672 or more. Boy Martin with 642 or more. Stanley Mortensen with 628. Joseph Smith with 617 or more. Frederick Roberts with 613 or more. Jimmy Greaves with 590. Fritz Walter, though German, right there too with 586 or more. Then Jimmy Kelly, Glenn Ferguson, Hugh Gallacher, Dixie Dean, John Aldridge, Jimmy McGrory, David Halliday, James Smith. These are not side notes. These are men who spent careers turning Saturday afternoons into rituals of repetition, goal after goal after goal until the total became larger than fame itself. And maybe no British goal-scoring image is more vivid than Dixie Dean, chasing 60 league goals for Everton in the 1927-28 season, on the final day. Against Arsenal, he entered the match with 57. Photographers crowded the ground, because they believed the impossible might happen. He scored once with a header, then from the penalty spot. Then, with 10 minutes left, another header from a corner gave him 60. A schoolboy ran onto the pitch just to shake his hand. Nearly a century later, that 60-goal league season still stands in England like a monument that nobody has managed to pull down. But the race for football immortality changed when the game began to become global television. That is why the Maracanã scene matters. Pelé was not just a goal scorer. He was football becoming myth in front of the world. Officially, many modern statisticians place him in the high 700s in senior official football. One major Olympic summary gives him 680 official club goals and 77 for Brazil, while RSSSF has listed him higher when including certain military and selection matches. Yet Guinness recognized his broader career total at 1,279 in 1,363 games, while Pelé himself often said 1,283. FIFA in recent years has often used the phrase more than 1,200, and there, in those shifting numbers, is the reason this debate never ends. Pelé did not simply score goals. He scored in an era when the border was blurry. Between official competition, prestige-friendly, tour match, representative match, and special appearance, was not always treated with today's clean categories. Romário lived in that same world, but with more swagger and more argument. Officially, different sources place him in places. Some say 760, some go higher, some lower. He himself claimed more than 1,000. Once friendlies, charity matches, youth games, and everything else were included. And on 20th of May 2007, at the age of 41, he scored a penalty for Vasco da Gama against Sport Recife that was celebrated as his 1,000th. Sound familiar? Another Brazilian striker, another stadium waiting for a number, another moment when celebration was bigger than accounting. Yet with Romário, the tension between genius and myth felt almost playful. He moved, one writer said, with the stealthy gait and sly gaze of a panther. Alessandro Costa Curta said that when Romário touched the ball, it made a magical sound. Tum tum tum, and that inside the penalty area he was unmarkable. Johan Cruyff told the famous story of Romário asking for time off for Carnival. Cruyff replied that if he scored 2 goals the next day, he could go. Romário scored twice in the first 20 minutes and then asked to be substituted because his plane was leaving in an hour. It sounds almost too perfect to be true, but it captures him completely. A striker who treated the box like sacred space, and everything outside it like an inconvenience. So where does the controversy truly begin? It begins with the words, official goal, because those words do not always mean the same. Some modern discussions focus only on senior first-class football at the highest recognized level. That is why old articles sometimes gave Josef Bican around 805 or 821. According to the Czech Federation, while other discussions gave Pelé 757. And Ronaldo passed those totals in the modern era with records documented to the second. Broader historical databases, especially those trying to capture football's full official life, count more. They may include regional leagues, reserve competition, lower divisions, official selection matches, military teams, city teams, traditional cups, and even cancelled games if treated as official. That is why one source can show Bican above 900 and another in the 800s. They are not always contradicting each other. Often they are answering different questions. And this is where the evidence becomes fascinating instead of frustrating. One major historical methodology explicitly says it includes all leagues, even regional and amateur, national and international cups, official tournaments, selection teams, and other sanctioned competitions, using club books, historical websites, and old press as sources. It marks active players. With an asterisk, it uses a plus sign when a number is only a lower bound, and more goals may yet be found. It even warns that there may be other players, with 500 or more official goals still missing from the list. That last detail should stop every football fan in their tracks. There may still be more. Not because somebody is hiding the truth, but because football's old memory is incomplete. Papers were lost. Borders changed. Wars interrupted careers. Clubs disappeared. Languages kept local legends trapped inside local archives. Some players dominated in eras that the modern football machine never packaged for the world. If you're still watching, you're exactly the type of football fan this channel was made for. Subscribe for more forgotten football history. Now look at what happens when you move from the ghosts to the fully filmed age. Cristiano Ronaldo's career exists almost entirely under the harshest light. Every major goal has been televised, replayed, archived, clipped, debated, and monetized. FIFA now credits him with the men's records for international goals and caps. He became the first player to score at 5 World Cups. He scored 450 times for Real Madrid in just 438 matches. He later became the first player to hit 100 goals for 4 different clubs. He has scored 25 goals in finals. He is closing in on 1,000 career goals, and unlike the legends of the past, almost nobody can argue that we do not know where those goals came from. We saw them. Lionel Messi exists in the same bright light, but his path looked different. Not the endless leap of Ronaldo, but the drifting genius who could break a record, while making it seem like he was only searching for beauty. In 2012, Messi scored 91 goals in a single calendar year, 79 for Barcelona and 12 for Argentina. A number FIFA still treats as astonishing even in an era used to statistical absurdity. That year matters because it reminded the football world that raw volume could feel artistic. Messi was not just collecting numbers, he was turning them into performances, and that is why the modern top end of the all-time list is so compelling. Ronaldo, with 975, Messi, with 925, Robert Lewandowski, up to 740, Luis Suarez on 606, Zlatan Ibrahimovic on 582. These are not only high numbers, they are high numbers earned. In the most scrutinized age the game has ever known. Every offside line checked, every competition categorized, every milestone turned into breaking news before the players leave the pitch. But here is the hidden detail that most people miss. The deeper you go into the top 50, the more football starts to reveal what it forgets. It forgets Abe Lenstra of the Netherlands, with 790 or more. It forgets Imre Schlosser, Franz Binder, Charles Fleming, Isidro Langara, Hugo Sanchez, Paul Deschamps, Zico sitting low. As 50th on one official all-time list with 546, it forgets that Glenn Ferguson reached 570. And James Kelly passed 574. It forgets Boy Martin, David Wilson, Jose Torres, Frederick Roberts. It forgets that local legends in Belfast, Budapest, Chemnitz, Lisbon, Glasgow, Rotterdam, and Prague once ruled their worlds as completely as any Ballon d'Or winner rules headlines now. And sometimes it forgets them because the camera forgot them first. No slow-motion montage, no worldwide broadcast rights, no video game cover, no social media army, only witness accounts, scorebooks, local fame, and the stubborn work of historians who spend years trying to rebuild. Careers from fragments. That is why Erwin Helmchen may be the most astonishing figure in this entire story. Almost 1,000 goals, more than 140 official hat-tricks, entire clusters of matches shaped by pre-war and wartime football, injuries, suspensions, missing games, and still the total rises to a level that feels unreal. He is not the face of football history. He is the warning inside football history, the warning that the sport does not always remember its scorers in proportion to what they actually did. The same goes for Josef Bican. The same goes for Ronald Rook. The same goes for Dayak. The same goes for Perateo. A modern fan can name marketing icons more easily than giants. but the archive is colder than fame. It does not care who sold more shirts. It only asks who kept scoring, and for how long, and in which matches. Those goals can still be proven. If this story surprised you, hit like and subscribe. It helps more football fans discover these incredible stories. So let's return to that night. At the Maracanã, Pelé scores. The crowd erupts. The number becomes immortal. What happened next is not silence, it is argument. Historians begin separating official from unofficial. Federations draw lines. Statisticians reopen old books. New lists appear. Some fans hate that process because it feels like cold mathematics attacking warm memory. But in truth, both things can live together. Pelé's 1000th still mattered. Romário's 1000th still mattered. Those nights were emotionally true, even if the arithmetic around them remains disputed. And that is why this story matters. Today, because the race for the most goals in football history is not only about ability, it is about how the game records itself, how it honors different eras, how it treats war, careers, how it classifies old competitions, how much value it gives to local dominance versus global visibility. It is about whether greatness must be televised to feel real. It is about whether an archived newspaper clipping from 1936 deserves respect. The top 50 tells us something deeper than who scored the most. It tells us football is larger than its own memory, larger than its own marketing, larger than names we repeat. At the top of one historical ledger stand Helmchen, Ronaldo, Bican, Rook, and Messi. Behind them come Jimmy Jones, Ferenc Puskás, Ferenc Deák, Abe Lenstra, Romário, and Pelé. Tommy Lawton, Robert Lewandowski, Gerd Müller, Sammy Hughes, Joe Bambrick, Ernst Wilimowski, Pongo Wiring, Boy Martin, Ferenc Bene, Eusebio, Stanley Mortensen, Fernando Peroteo, Joseph Smith, and Frederick Roberts, Gyula Zengeler, Luis Suarez, Jimmy Greaves, Uwe Seeler, Fritz Walter, Tulio Maravilla, and Ibrahimovic, David Wilson, James Kelly, Imre Schlosser, Glenn Ferguson, Franz Binder, Charles Fleming, and Gallagher, Dixie Dean, John Aldridge, Isidro Langara, Hugo Sanchez, Jose Torres, Jimmy McGrory, and Coxis, Paul Deschamps, David Halliday, James Smith, and Zico. 50 names, 50 different paths, some global, some local, some crystal clear, some wrapped in fog. Perhaps the most beautiful part is this. The list is still unfinished. Ronaldo is still adding. Messi kept climbing. Beyond what seemed possible. Old records are still being rechecked. Forgotten matches are found. There may still be other 500 goal scorers hidden in the game's older rooms. So when someone asks, who scored the most goals, the honest answer is not one name. It's a story of records and missing records, of kings and ghosts, of stadiums shaking, for milestone goals, of poor boys who played barefoot and became legends, of strikers who lived for one touch in one crowded box, of a sport still counting, its own heartbeat. And if you go back one last time to the Maracanã, to that night in 1969, you can almost see the truth in front of you, not in the number on the page, but in the feeling in the stands. Because before statisticians argue, before federations define categories, before documentaries like this revisit evidence, football begins with the same raw act it always has. The ball crosses the line, the crowd loses its mind, and for a moment, the world believes it has witnessed eternity. This documentary is based on historical records, interviews, reports, and publicly available information. Some claims and theories discussed remain disputed. Viewers are encouraged to explore the evidence and form their own conclusions. This video isn't for every football fan, but if you know someone who loves football history, share this story with them. Subscribe to Football Vault History, and I'll see you in the next documentary.